Hey guys, tonight we saddle up for a journey back in time, not to the cozy saloons or high noon showdowns of Hollywood westerns, but to the groggy, grimy mornings of real-life cowboys. Picture this, the sun hasn't even peeked over the horizon, yet your bones ache from sleeping on dirt, and your reward for surviving another night in the wild is a cup of coffee so strong it could probably strip paint. This isn't your hipster cafe brew, it's cowboy coffee, boiled over a smoky fire in a rusty tin pot, complete with a generous helping of floating grounds and regret. You're cold, you're tired, and if you think that coffee is going to help, you might want to sit down, assuming there's something besides a rock or a saddle nearby. You probably won't survive this cup, let alone the rest of the day. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe button. Only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. I always love seeing how far this sleepy little history crew stretches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake before the sun, head foggy, mouth dry, the fire's down to embers, and someone, maybe you, maybe that guy who snores like a buffalo, has already shuffled over to the pot. It sits crooked on a few smoldering logs, blackened and dented, filled with yesterday's leftover water and a fresh scoop of regret. Coarse, unfiltered coffee grounds dumped right in with no ceremony whatsoever. No French press, no pour over. Technique just you, a kettle, and the hopes that enough boiling will kill whatever crawled in there overnight. This isn't your first time, but it doesn't get easier. That first sip scalds the roof of your mouth and tastes like smoke, rust, and fury. It hits your stomach like a punch from a mule, and you swear again that you'll never drink this sludge again. Yet, you will because out here, coffee isn't optional. It's survival. It's what keeps your eyelids open after a week of rough cattle drives, night watches, and barely a wink of decent sleep. It's liquid grit, and cowboys drink it like it's a birthright. Historically, cowboy coffee was made with the coarsest beans money could buy, which wasn't saying much. These weren't premium roasted Ethiopian blends. Most cowhands got bottom barrel beans, over-roasted, unevenly ground, sometimes even mixed with pebbles or twigs. Traders sold what they could haul, and quality wasn't exactly top of mind. The beans were stored in burlap sacks and often soaked up the flavors of the wagon ride, dirt, sweat, gunpowder, and possibly a side of horse funk. Once the fire was hot, you'd fill the battered pot with water, whatever you had, creek or canteen, and dump the beans right in. Let it boil furiously for a while, maybe 10 minutes if you had the time, longer if you forgot about it while chasing a runaway horse. Then, if you were feeling fancy, you'd toss in something to help the grounds sink. Crushed eggshells, a splash of cold water, maybe even a dash of salt. Some said the eggshell trick helped reduce the acidity. Historians still argue whether that actually worked or was just a bit of cowboy folklore passed down with a wink and a grimace. The result? A jet-black potion strong enough to wake the dead or at least make them sit up and complain. It wasn't unusual for a new ranch hand to take one sip and immediately spit it out, prompting laughter from the rest of the crew. Welcome to the G range kid. Hope your stomach lining is tough. Cowboys drank this brew from anything they had on hand. Tin cups were common, but not guaranteed. You might end up slurping from a ladle, a gourd, or even the heel of your boot if things got really desperate. And let's be honest, after a week without bathing, could that boot taste any worse than the coffee itself? The sheer brutality of it all was part of the charm. You weren't here for comfort. You were here to keep cattle moving and not die of exposure or boredom. If your coffee didn't make your teeth hurt, was it even real cowboy? Coffee, and yet there was an art to it. Each chuck wagon had its designated cook often nicknamed Cookie, and that person had one sacred duty. Don't mess up the coffee. Get it too weak, and the cowboys rebel. Too strong, and you might accidentally start a stampede. There's a saying from the time, if you can pour it out, it ain't strong enough. One cowhand's memoir even noted a cook who used to throw in a horseshoe nail. If it sank, the coffee wasn't ready. If it floated, you were good to go. If it dissolved, congratulations, you just made authentic Cowboy Espresso. It's worth mentioning that this level of caffeination wasn't healthy. The acidic brew, especially made in tin or iron pots, could erode your teeth over time. Cowboys weren't exactly brushing after meals. Some even suffered ulcers, but it's not like they could pop into a clinic and complain. If your stomach burned, you just blamed the beans or the beans you were about to eat next. Oddly enough, there's fringe speculation that some cowboys developed a kind of caffeine dependency that bordered on religious. They'd plan their supply runs based on coffee availability, and more than a few stories mention fistfights breaking out when the beans ran low. There's something poetic about it. You, the rising sun, and a pot of coffee that tastes like molten soil. You stand over the fire, watching steam curl into the sky like a spirit rising up, and for a moment it feels like magic. Horrible, stomach-churning magic, but magic nonetheless. And you know what? By the second or third sip, your body stops fighting it. You're wide awake, the stiffness in your legs fades, and you can almost ignore the bitter aftertaste clinging to your tongue like a barnacle. Almost. You glance around. The other cowboys are stirring. Horses snort in the distance. Somewhere out there the cattle begin to moo, signaling another long, dusty day ahead. And you tip back your cup, close your eyes, and let the burn take over. The coffee's still hot when you crouch beside the fire, cradling your tin cup like it's some sacred artifact. Your fingers sting a little. This thing conducts heat like nobody's business, but the warmth cuts through the chill, and you cling to it because, frankly, you need something to distract you from the smell of wet leather and unwashed humanity. You're not alone. Around you, boots shuffle in the dirt as more bleary-eyed cowboys rise from their bedrolls. Nobody talks much yet. Words come later after the second cup, maybe third. For now it's all nods, yawns, and the low, familiar clang of tin against iron as Cookie starts poking at the beans for breakfast. And you're grateful you've got something to drink from, because not everyone does. Out here, a proper mug is a luxury. The classic image is that old tin cup looped to your saddlebag, dented and dark from 100 fires. But the reality wasn't always so romantic. If you lost your cup or never had one to begin with, you got creative. Cowboys were resourceful. Like that, you might whittle out a makeshift scoop from wood, repurpose a piece of gourd, or, if you were truly unlucky, resort to slurping it straight from the pot. But some used their boot heel. No, seriously. Some cowboy boots had enough backs and firm enough leather that in desperate moments they could be filled. Sloshy, foul-tasting, and guaranteed to make your socks even less appealing than they already were. But in the middle of nowhere, miles from the next trading post, it was better than nothing. There's a fringe anecdote from a 19th century cattle drive where a greenhorn, new to the trail, spilled his coffee cup, panicked, and borrowed the cook's ladle. Cookie, appalled at the sacrilege, promptly yanked off his own boot, dumped out a scorpion, and said, "Use this instead, rookie." Historians still argue whether this tale is more truth or tall tale, but honestly, either version fits. And it's not just about improvisation, it's about ownership. Your cup or whatever passed for one was personal. You didn't touch another man's cup, not unless you were ready to throw down. It carried your grease, your soot, and your backwash. It was part of your cowboy identity, like your saddle or your hat. Lose it, and you were just another fool sipping from his hands like a city boy. The cups themselves, usually tin or enamel-coated steel, lightweight, cheap, and capable of doubling as bowls or shaving basins. Some had the handles snapped off from careless packing or from being accidentally tossed in the fire. Others were blackened beyond recognition. And cleaning? Theft. Why bother? Rinsing was optional. Scrubbing was unheard of. Coffee residue gave it character. One popular superstition went that the older and darker your cup's interior, the better the flavor. Wipe it clean, and you'd be cursed with weak coffee for a week. Whether or not that's true, no cowboy was risking it. Your own mug, if you're lucky enough to have one, is a dented relic with a jagged lip from that time your horse kicked your saddlebag into a cactus. You hold it like a treasure, sipping carefully to avoid slicing your lip dot, and in a weird way, it's comforting. In a life defined by motion drives, drifts, and detours, this little beat-up object is one of the few constants. It wakes you up, burns your mouth, and lets you pretend, just for a second, that there's a rhythm to all this dust and discomfort. But don't get too sentimental, because you're also remembering that time Buck, the surly cowpoke with a crooked eye and constant scowl, forgot his cup and tried to steal yours. Big mistake. You spent the next 2 days riding with a black eye and coffee in your hat dot. Yeah, that happened. Of course, sometimes a cowboy chose not to use a cup at all, especially if the pot was just sitting there. You've seen it. Someone walks up, eyes half open, tips the pot forward, and sips straight from the spout like it's a water bottle. Burns their lips. Always burns their lips. And still they do it every time. Cookie hates it. He shouts, waves his ladle, threatens to fill the next pot with old grease and squirrel meat. But he doesn't really mean it. After all, coffee is sacred, and a cowboy without coffee is a dangerous man dot. It's worth noting here that not all coffee was served hot. If you brewed a big batch in the morning and it sat through the afternoon, it became trail brew, lukewarm, bitter, and full of surprise floaties. Most cowboys didn't care. You'd swig it down anyway, maybe strain it through your teeth if you were feeling refined, and on long rides, You didn't have time to stop and boil water. Some cowboys kept leftover brew in their canteens. Others preloaded their saddlebags with grounds and hoped to find fire and water later. There's even evidence that some chewed the beans raw, chasing the buzz without the bother. Modern-day survivalists have tried replicating this lifestyle, and most agree it's unpleasant, especially when you don't have a real cup and your mug starts leaking from a loose seam or mystery puncture, which is why when you find a decent drinking vessel, you guard it with your life. You glance around again. Cookie's ladling out more brew, muttering something about lazy ranch hands and coyotes with better manners. You raise your cup in mock salute. He glares. You smile. It's a ritual. The sun's higher now, casting gold over the sagebrush and shimmering off your cup's soot-blackened sides. Your breath puffs in the morning chill, and somewhere behind you, a horse nickers softly. You finish your last sip. Grounds cling to your teeth like tiny gravel pebbles, and your tongue feels like it's been sandpapered. But your blood's moving. Your eyes are open, and your hands are steady. That's good enough. You wipe the cup on your trousers because napkins don't exist and clip it back to your belt. And just like that, the day begins. By now, the sun's cresting just high enough to make you squint, and the morning's chill gives way to a heat that smells like horses, dust, and yesterday's sweat. You'd think a fresh cup of coffee would bring a little comfort, but as you take your first gulp of a new batch cookies just brewed, it's clear that comfort is not part of the plan. There is no filter. None. No mesh screen. No paper cone. No clever pour-over device. You're staring into a thick, swirling mess of coffee. Grounds dancing on the surface of an oily, black pool that somehow manages to taste both burnt and undercooked. You take another sip and immediately regret it. The gritty sludge hits the back of your throat and slides down with the texture of wet dirt. Filtering in the cowboy world was wishful thinking. Grounds were simply dumped into boiling water, stirred a little, and left to settle if you were lucky. If you were unlucky, Cookie had gone off to chase down a mule or yell at a greenhorn, and the pot just sat there stewing until it achieved the consistency of roofing tar. Historians still argue whether this hands-off brewing style was based on efficiency, ignorance, or simply apathy. But one thing's for sure, it was universal. The logic was, if it's hot and black, it's coffee. You'd think there would be some trick to make it more drinkable, and there was kind of. Some cowboys would tap the side of the pot, too, coax the grounds to the bottom. Others swore that if you let the pot cool for exactly 38 seconds and then shook it counterclockwise, the grounds would magically disappear. Spoiler, they didn't. A more popular method involved adding a splash of cold water to shock the grounds into sinking. It worked sometimes, but more often than not, your cup still had floaters, big floaters, like, did I just drink a twig? Floaters. The real secret wasn't avoiding grounds, it was training your mouth to dodge them. You learn the cowboy. Sip. Tilt the cup just enough to get the liquid. Keep your lips tight and let your tongue serve as the final filter. And when that fails, you spit quietly into the fire, or over your shoulder if you're trying to be subtle, which you rarely are. You start to recognize who among your crew has adapted to this grim reality, and who hasn't. The seasoned hands drink with the practiced grace of monks, at a tea ceremony. The newer ones still cough and wipe their tongues on their sleeves. It's a rite of passage. There's a moment, too, when you look at the bottom of your cup, at that thick, black sediment clinging like volcanic ash, and you wonder, is this what my stomach looks like now? Probably. There's a fringe theory out there that this method of brewing actually preserves some nutrients from the beans that modern methods lost. But if that's the case, it came at a cost. Dental erosion, acid reflux, and possibly early onset bitterness as a personality trait. You stand up to stretch. Your spine cracks like a dry branch, and you wince. Not from pain, but because you nearly drop your coffee into the dirt, and losing a cup now would be devastating. You glance down into the cup again. A thick cluster of grounds has formed a swirling little galaxy. You half expect it to start moving on its own. You don't blink. You finish the cup anyway, and here's the kicker. The lack of filtering wasn't just a culinary sin, it was a medical hazard. Those beans, especially when overboiled, released a ton of acid. Not the psychedelic kind, unfortunately. The stomach burning, enamel melting kind. You can feel it working on your teeth already, as if your molars are trying to shrink back into your gums for protection. One early trail account even mentions cowboys complaining of mouth grit that lingered for hours, giving them a permanent crunch whenever they talked. Some chewed leaves or tobacco to mask the texture. Others just sucked it up, sometimes literally. And yet you still drink it, because this is life now. A life ruled not by sunrise or roosters, but by the simmering pot hanging over the fire, promising a liquid jolt of energy and digestive chaos. You. Here's someone behind you swear softly. They bit down on the ground. A loud crunch, a muttered curse, and then the universal cowboy phrase. Guess I needed that tooth loose anyway. Another guy just downs the whole thing, grounds and all, like it's soup. No hesitation. He wipes his beard and says, builds. Character. You can't tell if he means the coffee or the pain. Of course, every once in a while, you'd meet a fancy cowboy, usually from the East, who brought along a filter of sorts. Some kind of cloth bag or a tin contraption that kept the grounds in place. These devices were met with awe, envy, and occasionally sabotage. After all, if one man gets smooth coffee, the rest might riot. You either all suffer, or none do not one. Particularly bitter story tells of a cowboy who showed up with a little French drip coffee pot polished, proper, porcelain-lined. He used it once. The next day it mysteriously vanished. Some say it fell off the wagon. Others claim it was fed to the fire in an act of democratic justice. Because cowboy coffee isn't supposed to be good. It's supposed to be there. It's supposed to wake you up with violence and carry you through the trail with pure, scorched caffeine. You walk over to the fire for a refill, your cup now more soot than steel. Cookie hands you the pot. No ladle, no spoon. Just a nod and a muttered, careful. It's fresh. You pour the liquid glugs like something alive. You sip. The bitterness hits your tongue first, then your throat, then your soul. Perfect. You sit cross-legged now, cup balanced between your palms, steam curling up into your nose like it's trying to warn you off. Too late. The damage is done. That first cup has already started its unholy pilgrimage through your insides, and you feel the twitchy buzz just beneath your skin. Your heart starts tap dancing. Your eyelids stop fighting gravity. And like clockwork, your mood begins to shift. Because out here, the quality of your day hinges entirely on the quality of the brew. And right now, it's awful. Which means today's probably going to be awful. To Dot in Cowboy culture. Coffee didn't just wake you up. It defined the tone of the entire trail. A smooth, rich pot, rare as it was, might bring a moment of civility, a little less growling at each other, fewer arguments about who gets the best saddlebag spot. But a bad pot? That was personal. Cowboys could forgive a man for snoring, for stealing jerky, even for cheating at cards. But if you botched the coffee, you were on thin ice. Figuratively, of course, since you were probably standing in a patch of Texas dirt that hadn't seen ice since the last ice age. The cookie has always had power. He might not ride the trail or rope the cattle, but he had dominion over the pot and with it over everyone's mood. Cookie's brew could be your salvation or your stomach's worst nightmare. Make no mistake, a good cookie was gold, a bad one, legendary for all the wrong reasons. One trail diary from the 1870s refers to a cook nicknamed Turpentine Joe. No one knew his real name. They just knew that his coffee tasted like cleaning fluid and had a tendency to make you see colors. That ain't there. Whether he actually used turpentine or just scorched the beans beyond recognition remains unclear. Historians still argue whether he was a culinary criminal or just tragically misunderstood. You sip again and wince. This pot is giving Turpentine Joe a run for his money. The man next to you spits into the fire and mutters, "Tastes like Cookie used saddle water again." You glance at Cookie. He shrugs like, "And what if I did?" The thing is, coffee was more than just a drink. It was a source of pride. In the middle of nowhere, with nothing but hardtack and heartbreak for comfort, cowboys judged each other by the little things. Your horse, your boots, your drawl, and your brew. Some took it very seriously. You've known cowboys who carried their own private stash of beans hidden away from the communal supply just to make one secret, perfect cup when the others weren't looking. One guy even had a tiny pouch sewn inside his hat. When asked why, he just said, "Insurance." But most of the time, everyone drank from the same pot, which meant you were at the mercy of the brewer. If Cookie had a bad night, too little sleep, too much whiskey stepped in a cactus again, you were going to taste it. And it wasn't just about bitterness. The strength of the coffee mattered. A weak pot was almost worse than no coffee at all. One cowboy described it as brown sadness. Water. Another called it dishwater with dreams. But a strong brew, that was something else. It hit like a punch from a prize fighter, sharp and immediate, like your brain skipping a beat just to catch up. It made your ears ring and your jaw clench. It burned through fog and memory alike. And once it was in your veins, there was no going back. Still, it wasn't always a peaceful process. Disputes broke out, not just over who made the coffee, but how they made it. Boil time, bean ratio, water type, everyone had an opinion. One man swore you had to stir with a stick carved from mesquite. Another claimed cowhorn stirring brought out the sweetness. It didn't. Arguments over coffee could turn into full-blown shouting matches. On one occasion, someone knocked the pot into the fire during a disagreement over brewing time. That man was not invited back to the next cattle drive, but even with all the tension, coffee was the great unifier. It brought cowboys together around a shared pot, no matter how horrible it tasted. It was a ritual, a sacred one. Even the most grizzled loner, the guy who spoke 5 words a week and preferred horses to humans, showed up for coffee. And when it was bad, you bonded over the suffering. This stuff could take paint off a wagon, someone says. Nose wrinkling. Could take taste off your tongue. Another adds. You nod silently and sip again. Out here, sarcasm is seasoning. It helps the medicine. Go down the worst part. You'll do it again tomorrow. And the day after that. Because as much as you complain, you need this. It's not just caffeine, it's ritual, rhythm, and a moment of shared misery before the saddle chafing begins. Someone starts tuning a harmonica nearby. It sounds like 2 angry bees in a jar, but no one tells him to stop. The morning's coffee-induced mood is already too fragile dot, so you stretch your legs, tuck your cup back into your saddlebag, and brace yourself, because the real ride hasn't even started. And Cookie? He's already brewing another pot. The beans are still rattling in the pan when Cookie squints at you over the fire and says, "You ever tried eggshells in your coffee?" You hesitate, unsure whether it's a threat or an actual question. The answer doesn't matter. Because soon enough you're watching him crack a few eggs yesterday's, probably crumble the shells between soot-stained fingers, and drop them right into the pot, like it's some kind of frontier seasoning. You blink. You think surely this can't help, but surprisingly, it kind of does. Using crushed eggshells in cowboy coffee was one of the oldest tricks in the bunkhouse book. The logic behind it wasn't just superstition. The calcium carbonate in the shells actually helped neutralize some of the coffee's acidity, settling the grounds and making the brew a little less like stomach acid with rage issues. You'll never call it smooth, but compared to the usual sludge, it's practically refined. The process goes like this. You boil the grounds as usual violently, aggressively, no mercy, and then just before pulling the pot off the fire, you toss in a handful of eggshells. They swirl around, knock into the grounds, help them clump together, and if the cowboy gods are smiling, sink everything to the bottom in a neat, bitter sludge. Historians still argue whether this method came from Scandinavian settlers, French, fur trappers, or some desperate soul who just didn't want to waste his breakfast scraps. But the fact is, it stuck around. And if it worked even half the time, that was good enough for the trail. Of course, that assumes you have eggs. When supplies were short, and they usually were, cowboys got creative. Cold water was the next favorite method. After boiling the coffee into a roiling cauldron, they'd add a splash of cold water to shock the grounds into submission. The sudden change in temperature caused the particles to clump and, ideally, sink. Does it always work? Absolutely not. But it feels like it should. So you keep doing it, watching those stubborn grounds bob around like defiant little logs in a river. You sip carefully, tongue acting like a goalie, teeth straining out the grit. It's like drinking gravel tea. But the caffeine is kicking in, so you let it slide. Then there's the more experimental stuff. One cowboy once suggested throwing in a piece of raw potato. Said it pulled the bitterness out. Another swore by adding a crushed lump of charcoal for a cleaner taste. Someone else used to mutter prayers over the pot just in case. But the worst trick by far? Horseher. Dot. Yes, horsehair. Some desperate camp cooks would actually stir their brew with a tail hair bundle, claiming it helped filter out the bits. It didn't. It just added extras, texture, surprise, a little piece of Buck the Trail Pony in every cup. You're not entirely sure if Cookie's ever tried that. And frankly, you don't want to know Dot today. It's eggshells and cold water, which counts as gourmet by Cowboy standards. You swirl the pot, watching the remnants swirl and sink and nod in approval. It's amazing what you can learn to tolerate when there are no alternatives. Nearby, a grizzled old hand named Wallace. He's been riding longer than most folks have. Been alive tells you that the best coffee he ever had came from a place where they stirred in molasses. Took the edge off, he says with a nostalgic sigh. Also gave me a 3-day stomach ache. Worth it. You take another sip. This batch is better. The bitterness is still there, but muted, like someone yelling through a pillow. There's even a hint of sweetness, or maybe that's just your brain tricking you after days of the same flavor. There's a strange camaraderie in watching everyone pretend this tastes fine. No one's praising it out loud, of course. That would break the spell, but you see the subtle nods. The way someone goes back for a second cup without spitting. The slight upward twitch of Cookie's mouth, his version of a victory dance. You're not exactly grateful, but you're not mad either. And on the trail, that's high praise. Someone tries to joke. Hey, Cookie, throw some eggshells in the beans next. Might make 'em edible. Cookie doesn't even look up, just stirs the pot like a man stirring his enemies into oblivion, because beans are coming, and with them the second worst part of the day. But first you finish your coffee. Carefully. The eggshells have done their job well enough, but you still feel something crunch between your teeth. You choose not to investigate. That's the thing about Cowboy coffee. You don't ask too many questions. You just drink, grit your jaw, and hope it hits your bloodstream before your boots hit the trail. Dot. By now, the sun's high. The fire's getting smoky, and the smell of breakfast beans is rising on the breeze. Coffee cups are clinking. Men are shaking out their saddles and stretching their spines. Someone's singing off-key. And you rinse your cup with a little leftover water because soap is still just a rumor and set it near the fire to dry. Dot. Then you do what any self-respecting cowboy would do after a rough cup of eggshell-enhanced rocket fuel. You get ready for round 2. You think you've survived the worst of it. Coffee, so acidic it could ETCH your initials into the tin pot. But as the sun climbs higher and your stomach starts to make those curious warning noises, you remember the coffee was just the beginning. Now come the beans, and not the fancy herb-seasoned ones you'd find in a city dinner. These are trail beans, canned, bland, and cooked into a texture somewhere between paste and gravel. You can smell them now, bubbling low in the pot, while Cookie mumbles to himself and pokes at the fire with a stick shaped like a bent finger. But no one touches the beans until the coffee's gone. That's the rule. First comes the brew, then the food. Out here, coffee isn't the sidekick to breakfast. It is breakfast. It's the main event, the starter pistol, the fire-breathing dragon. that wakes the whole camp. If the beans show up too early, no one's ready. If they show up too late, everyone's already grumpy and vibrating with caffeine dot. So you sip your second cup and pretend you're not tasting iron. It's just a little flavor from the pot, right? Right? The coffee you're drinking now is stronger than the first batch. Somehow, it has a darker hue and the faint, terrifying scent of something burnt. Maybe a twig, maybe a bug, maybe Cookie's patience. Either way, it's hot and it's bitter, and it does the job. Your lips tingle. Your gums feel like they're retracting out of self-defense. You brace for the first bite of beans with the same attitude you'd reserve for a root canal, resigned, hungry, and mildly afraid. The beans arrive in ladles, big ones. Cookie scoops them out of a cast-iron pot that looks like it was salvaged from a pirate ship, slapping them into tin plates with a wet plop. They're brownish, overcooked, and steaming hot. If you're lucky, they're only slightly scorched. You find a seat on a flat rock. It's lumpy, but your standards are somewhere in the basement of a mining shaft these days. You balance your plate on one thigh, your cup on the other, and stare at the two halves of your breakfast. One that burns your mouth, and one that's about to burn its way through the rest of you. But it's all part of the routine. Beans and coffee Cowboy. Staples. Cheap, portable, and shelf-stable in a way that made sense when your pantry was a saddlebag and your refrigerator was hope it doesn't get too sunny. Historically speaking, cowboys relied heavily on canned food, especially beans. They were high in protein, didn't spoil, and had the added benefit of acting as social defense mechanisms once digestion kicked in. Coffee and beans together? That was like loading your internal systems with two rival gangs and locking the doors. And yet, it's what you eat. Every day, twice a day if you're lucky. Sometimes cold, sometimes half-cooked, always necessary. You poke the beans with a fork. They resist slightly. You taste them. They're exactly how you remember. Salty, bland, and somehow dry and mushy at the same time. Someone nearby says, "Could use a little pepper." You reply, "Could use a little mercy." But you eat them, because this is the closest thing to a meal you'll have until dusk, and your stomach is already rumbling like a stampede of angry mules. The coffee helps them go down, sort of. You alternate bites and sips like you're pairing fine wine with charred toast. There's no elegance, just survival. And here's the strange part. Over time, you get used to it. The burn, the bitterness, the low-rent food chemistry happening in your belly. It all becomes normal. Not good. Never good, but expected. Like the smell of saddle leather or the ache in your knees. Some cowboys claimed coffee made the beans better. It cuts the slime, they'd say. Others argued the opposite, that beans made the coffee more tolerable, like washing down tar with mud. Historians still debate the true order of operations. Did cowboys drink first, then eat? Eat, then drink? Mix it all in one tin and call it cowboy stew? There's evidence for all three. One well-documented trail recipe involves dumping beans straight into the coffee pot and boiling the whole mess together. You're thankful that's not today, because today, at least Cookie's trying. You see him now poking a bit of bacon into the pot, maybe to season the next batch. It won't help much, but the gesture counts around you. The rest of the crew is quiet chewing, slurping, occasionally coughing when the coffee hits a sensitive spot. A couple guys are already wiping their plates clean with old crusts of bread or pieces of jerky. The wind kicks up. Dust swirls. Your coffee's almost gone. You knock back the last bit. It's lukewarm now, and the grounds have settled into a fine mud at the bottom. You feel a crunch between your molars and just sigh. Whatever it was, it's in your system now. Somewhere out there your horse snorts. The cattle are waking. The sun is high enough to make your shirt stick to your back. And soon it'll be time to ride again. But for now, you're full. You're caffeinated. And your teeth, though slightly eroded, are still intact. Mostly. You rinse your plate with a splash of water. Swish out your cup with yesterday's spit trail. Hygiene at its finest, and pack up, because the day's only just begun, and odds are you'll need more coffee by noon. By mid-morning, you're bouncing in the saddle, belly full of beans and coffee, reins slack in one hand, and a mild stomach ache blooming somewhere deep inside. You can't tell if it's the acidity, the overcooked pinto paste, or just your body, rejecting the entire concept of cowboy cuisine. And now you're thirsty. Not the kind of thirsty that asks politely. The kind that taps you on the spine with a sledgehammer and says, "Hey partner, maybe don't rely on hot bean juice for hydration next time, but guess what? There is no next time, because your only options are warm canteen water, whatever's in that stagnant creek you crossed 20 minutes ago, or another cup of coffee." You glance around. Sure enough, Cookie's still got the pot swinging from a tripod back at the chuck wagon. He's brewing another round like he's got a personal vendetta against human kidneys. You know it's a bad idea, but your mouth feels like sandpaper and regret, and the wind's picked up enough to dry your eyeballs. So you do what any sleep-deprived, sun-scorched, mildly rattled cowboy would do. You swing off your horse, stumble, over to the fire, and pour yourself a third cup. You've reached that special part of the trail where hydration and caffeination become the same thing. And this cup, oh, this one's bold. Burnt beans boiled for too long in water that may or may not have included a bug or two. You see one floating near the top, wings spread like it's sunbathing. You flick it away and sip anyway, because your body is a mystery. Now, a tumbleweed of conflicting signals. You're dehydrated, but you're also jittery. Your tongue feels both numb and sensitive. Your stomach is rumbling like distant thunder. And yet, somehow you crave more. Historically, cowboys faced this exact dilemma every day. Water was scarce, often warm, often shared with livestock, and rarely clean. Even when you had water, it usually tasted like tin, algae, or iron. So what did you do? You boiled it into something awful, but predictably awful. That's what coffee was. Reliable. It didn't need to taste good. It just needed to be hot, dark, and safe. Safer, at least, than dipping your head into a pond and hoping your intestines didn't launch a rebellion. 2 days later, one cowboy memoir even describes water that was so thick with mosquito eggs it wriggled before it rippled, which is exactly the kind of poetry you don't want to drink, but did anyway. So coffee became the fallback. Not because it was refreshing, but because it was less dangerous than the alternative. Boiling killed some bacteria. And besides, the coffee's bitterness masked the metallic or brackish aftertastes of questionable water sources. You sip again and feel your lips peel back in protest. This one's got a bite. The pot must have been on the fire since dawn. Maybe Cookie dumped in the rest of yesterday's grounds. Maybe he added that spoonful of something brownish from the mystery sack. You don't ask Dot, because in cowboy culture, asking what's in your coffee is a rookie mistake. The answer's never comforting. Better to assume it's mostly beans and mostly water and leave the rest to fate. You walk back to your horse, cup in hand, still sipping. The caffeine hits your system again. You feel your pulse in your ears. You swear your eyelashes are vibrating. Your mouth is dry, but now it's dry and awake. This is the paradox of cowboy coffee. It wakes you up, then dries you out. It sharpens your focus, then gives you the shakes. It fills you with energy, then sends your body hunting for an oasis. That doesn't exist. There's a rumor you've heard whispered in half-joking tones around late-night campfires that some cowboys went whole weeks drinking nothing but coffee. Not out of choice, but necessity. No clean water. No fresh supplies. Just beans and fire and a pot that never got fully cleaned. You can almost believe it, because coffee, for all its flaws, was a kind of medicine. A stimulant, yes, but also a morale booster, a warm comfort on freezing nights, a way to bring men together even when everything else fell apart. Cowboys drank it for energy, for focus, for routine, and sometimes just for the illusion of control. Of course, there were downsides, plenty of them. The dehydration was just the beginning. That constant acidity, it tore up your insides. You've heard of cowboys with stomach ulcers so bad they'd wince every time they swallowed. Others had tooth enamel so eroded their smiles looked like crooked piano keys. And sleep? Forget about it. You'd think after a day of hard riding and sunburn, your body would just collapse. But drink 3 or 4 cups of black cowboy, jet fuel after sundown, and you'd lie awake listening to coyotes argue about dinner. Some guys tried to quit, said they'd go a day without it, that they'd drink water instead, maybe brew some. Herbal tea if they could find a mint leaf or 2. They always came back, always. You finish the cup. Your mouth feels like a chimney. You look around and realize most of the crew's already riding ahead, leaving dust trails behind them. You swing back onto your horse, rein him in, and kick into a slow trot. The day's just getting started. The sun's hot, the wind's dry. Your tongue sticks to the roof of your mouth, and you think maybe just one more cup after lunch. By now, you've accepted that your body runs on caffeine and stubbornness. The coffee doesn't even taste like food anymore. It's more like a chemical process, something industrial, something your insides should probably file a complaint about, but you're past caring. You ride through open country now, the herd lowing in the distance, the dust kicked up behind your boots, and the heat baking the back of your neck. There's not a cloud in the sky, just endless blue and the occasional buzzard circling, probably waiting to see which cowboy's going to drop from dehydration first. You tug at your canteen. It sloshes, barely, and the water inside, warm, metallic, and tinged with yesterday's everything. You stare at it, shake it once, and tuck it back. You know the truth. It's coffee time again, but before that can happen, you need water, more precisely, something that resembles water, which means someone has to go find it. So you veer off the trail for a spell, ride toward the distant whisper of a creek you passed earlier, and hope it hasn't dried up into a muddy suggestion of itself. You find it eventually, sort of. It's not much, just a trickle winding through. Some tall grass surrounded by hoof prints, bird droppings, and the unmistakable tang of horse sweat. But water's water. You dismount, kneel, and dip your tin pot straight into the murky flow. The bottom stirs up instantly cloudy silt, tiny pebbles, and something suspiciously jelly-like. You wince, hold your breath, and scoop anyway. This is where Cowboy coffee truly earns its stripes. Boiling this sludge is a matter of survival. You know what's probably lurking in it. Parasites, bacteria, maybe a frog with boundary issues. But with enough heat and enough coffee grounds, you can convince yourself it's drinkable. Not safe exactly, but drinkable. Back at the fire, Cookie doesn't even blink when he sees the pot. He just pours it into the kettle like it's no different than fresh mountain spring. You watch the chunky water merge with leftover grounds from earlier, already dark and dense like hot tar. Let it boil good, Cookie mutters. You don't want to meet the worms. You really done single quotes tea. Historically, cowboys rarely had the luxury of fresh water. They took what they could get: streams, puddles, horse troughs, and made the most of it. Boiling was essential. Coffee made it tolerable. Together they formed a crude, caffeinated form of water purification. Some trail guides recommended filtering through a bandana first. Others just let the fire do the work. One especially desperate method involved digging shallow wells in dry creek beds and praying something seeped through. It rarely did. Historians still argue whether these water sources did more harm than good. Some claim coffee helped mask the taste of disease-ridden water without actually preventing illness. Others believe the high temperatures and acidic properties killed enough bugs to keep cowboys on their feet. You're not sure what to believe. All you know is the pot is boiling now, aggressively, ominously, and Cookie's stirring like a wizard mid-spell. He adds the grounds, maybe a pinch of salt, and gives it one last shake. Then he ladles it into your cup. It steams like a geyser. You blow on it, watching the surface swirl. There's a fleck of something floating there. You choose not to identify. That's a recurring theme now: strategic ignorance. The first sip makes your eyes water, not from heat, but from sheer intensity. The flavor hits you like a fence post to the teeth, earthy, metallic, bitter, and somehow meaty. You glance at Cookie. This from the creek, he nods. Horse drank it first, means it's clean. You decide not to point out that the horse also relieved itself in that same creek. Instead, you drink because, as bad as it is, it's hot. And it feels safe, which is something you can't say about most things out here. There's something deeply strange about the mental math you're doing now, weighing the potential for gastrointestinal horror against the craving for caffeine. On one side, parasites. On the other, the unmistakable call of the trail, and the knowledge that without coffee, your legs might actually stop working. You choose the coffee. Always the coffee. Nearby, someone groans. Tastes like fish. Someone else answers. Then it's fresher than last time. A third cowboy sips and says, spicy. You don't know whether to laugh or cry, so you settle for drinking in silence. This is the life. Dirty water, dirty beans, and the illusion of hydration. You're sweating, but your mouth's dry. Your hands are jittery, but your energy's crashing. The coffee gives you just enough juice to stay upright, but not enough to feel good. You wonder if you've ever actually been hydrated, if maybe you were born mildly dehydrated and the cowboy lifestyle just leaned into it. It would explain a lot. Still, the ritual brings comfort. You drink, you grimace, you survive. And in the absence of clean water, that's a pretty decent trade. You finish the cup, tap it out, and nod to Cookie. He's already starting the next batch. Because no matter how bad it is, coffee always beats creek juice straight up. Every single time. You've been back in the saddle for hours now, the horizon baking under the weight of midday sun. The air shimmers above the dry plain, and everything smells like warm leather, horse sweat, and that faint acidic tang still clinging to your breath. Your lips are cracked. Your boots are hotter than a branding iron. You're tired, sore, and just this side of delirious. But you're still upright, and that means the coffee's working, sort of. You're also starting to feel a little weird. Not bad, exactly. Just like your body is running in two directions at once. Your heart's revving like a wind-up toy. Your tongue feels like cotton dipped in ash. And your stomach is playing percussion somewhere under your ribs. This is what happens when you've had 4 cups of cowboy coffee and exactly 1 mug of water that probably wasn't actually water. The caffeine is doing its job, but it's also drying you out faster than the desert wind. And yet, because this is the logic of cowboy living, you want more. You crave that strange, bitter sludge. Not because it's delicious, it's not, or because it's refreshing, also not, but because it feels like motion, like clarity, like the only thing standing between you and full body collapse. So when Cookie rides up beside you, bouncing on a creaky wagon seat, holding a dented pot with the lid askew and offers a refill, you don't hesitate. You just hold out your cup and say, God help me. This one's different, though. It's thicker. Hotter. More violent. You sip and almost drop the cup. It hits your throat like liquid lightning. You feel your spine straighten. Your brain fizzes. You blink into the sun like you're seeing it for the first time. This, you realize, is revenge coffee. It's the pot that sat on the coals too long, that absorbed half the ashes from the fire, that was stirred with a stick Cookie used earlier to shoo off a raccoon. But it's also strong. Really strong. The kind of strong that makes your eyebrows twitch and your vision narrow. It tastes like punishment and smells like regret, but in the best way. And this is where things get interesting, because cowboy coffee wasn't just about waking up, it was about functioning. You had cattle to move, saddles to tighten, fences to patch, predators to watch for, and sometimes, if you were really unlucky, bandits to chase off, or stampedes to stop. You couldn't do that half-dash awake. And since there were no energy drinks, no protein bars, and definitely no yoga breaks, you leaned hard on the one thing that never ran out, caffeine. There's a journal from the late 1800s where a cowboy wrote, "If I drink more coffee, I think I'll start speaking in Morse code." Same entry, he mentions being able to hear ants walking. That might be a metaphor. It might not. Historians still debate whether chronic caffeine use made cowboys better at their jobs, or just more prone to pacing and nervous tics. Some say it helped sharpen their instincts. Others argue it made them paranoid and prone to talking to fence posts. You look around now and can't decide which camp you fall into. Your hands are steady, but only if you keep them moving. Your thoughts are clear, but bouncing like hail in a tin bucket. You squint down at your cup. The surface has formed that telltale oil slick. It's beautiful, terrifying, reflective enough that you almost see your future self in its sleepless, wide-eyed muttering about bean ratios. The other cowboys are feeling it, too. One's humming at a speed that sounds like a fly trapped in. A jug.another is cleaning his saddle with a level of intensity usually reserved for surgery. Cookie, meanwhile, is laughing softly to himself. You can't tell if he's pleased with his latest brew or just drifting into caffeine-induced madness. Either way, he looks proud, or at least satisfied. You try not to look too closely at the pot. It's starting to warp from constant heat. The handle jiggles when lifted. The lid clinks with every bump of the wagon dot. It's held together more by willpower than metallurgy now. You sip again, just a little, because even though your hands are sweating and your tongue feels like a piece of boiled saddle blanket, you know this is all part of the plan. Cowboy life wasn't just hard, it was repetitive. Long days, short nights, and a steady grind of muscle and sun and silence. Coffee broke that up. It gave shape to the hours. Something to look forward to. Something to talk about. Complain about. Joke about. It was more than a drink. It was a ritual. You feel that now. The way your body reacts almost mechanically. The way your breath shortens but your senses sharpen. The way you suddenly care about which way the wind is blowing or whether that cloud looks like rain, even if you don't trust your hands anymore. You do trust the coffee, and so despite every signal from your dehydrated cells, despite your dry throat and twitchy eye, despite the subtle, increasing tremor in your right leg, you sip and ride and sip again, because this is what you do now. Are a cowboy, and your blood type is probably coffee negative. The sun is tilting now, casting long amber shadows across the plain. The cattle are quieter, rumbling low, settling into the rhythm of evening, and the wind has softened into a lazy breeze that tugs at your hat and carries the scent of dry sagebrush and, yes, more coffee. Because guess what Cookie's doing? That's right, another pot. You've stopped trying to count how many you've had. Somewhere between a couple and enough to vibrate through solid rock. Your hands aren't trembling yet, but they're hovering right on the edge, like a poker player with a bad bluff and no exit plan. Still, when the smell hits your nose, smoky, bitter, laced with whatever magic happens when scorched beans meet desperation, you find yourself drawn to it again. Not out of thirst, not even out of habit, but because it's there. That's how cowboy coffee works. It's not a choice, it's a gravitational pull, one that drags you, 10 cup first, straight into the heart of a ritual that never ends. This batch looks mean. The pot is black as pitch, the handle wrapped with a strip of hide so it won't burn your hand clean off. The liquid inside is bubbling like a swamp in a thunderstorm, and Cookie's stirring it with something that might be a stick or might be part of an old rifle. Let it steep, he says, voice gravelly. This one's got teeth. You believe him, because by now you've learned that not all cowboy coffee is created equal. Some batches are weak, others are strong. And then there are the ones that feel like they've been brewed with a personal grudge. This one, it's all vengeance, and it smells like it. You pour your cup slowly, watching the dark stream glug from the spout like motor oil. It steams in the cool evening air. You tilt it to your lips and sip carefully, cautiously. Reverently. It's awful. And it's perfect. Thick, acrid, and shockingly bitter. No notes of caramel or fruit or toasted almond here. Just the taste of burned earth, rusted iron, and faint undertones of whatever was in the bottom of the pot 2 days ago. But it's hot, it's bold, and it hits you like a freight wagon. You lean back against your saddlebag, staring out at the sky turning pink and orange. The heat of the cup warms your fingers. The heat of the coffee warms, well, everything else. In a way, it's almost comforting. Like hugging a cactus that's trying its best, and you're not alone. Around you, the rest of the cowboys are doing the same, drinking in silence, eyes on the horizon, mouths set in that familiar grimace that says, "This is the worst thing I've ever loved." No one talks much during evening coffee. Mornings are for grumbling. Afternoons are for muttering. But evenings? Evenings are for staring off into space, listening to the fire crackle, and letting the coffee do its quiet, sinister work. You feel it now, the way your senses come alive again. The twitch behind your eyes, the slight tingle in your fingertips, that fine buzz under your skin, like bees humming in your bones. This is what keeps you going. Not sleep, not rest, not peace, just this bitter brown fuel. And yes, you could stop. You could say, "That's enough for today," rinse out your cup, and try to wind down like a sensible person. But you won't, because the fire's warm, and the pot's full, and Cookie just muttered something about a new trick he's trying. And you need to know. So you sip again, and again. You don't even notice the grounds anymore. They're part of the texture, like chewing sand with a caffeine chaser. There's a rumor, half joke, half legend, that cowboys drank so much unfiltered coffee they started grinding their own teeth into dust. One guy reportedly lost a filling mid-swig and didn't notice for 2 days. Another claimed his spit could strip varnish. Historians still debate how accurate these stories are, but considering how often you've bitten down on a rogue bean shard, you're not inclined to doubt it. You glance down at your cup. The surface has gone from swirling to calm, and the bottom has collected a sediment layer thick enough to grow something in. Probably best not to investigate. Instead, you finish it in one go. It scalds your throat and leaves your tongue numb. Your eyes water. Your jaw clenches. You smile. There it is. That rush, that strange mix of clarity and chaos, of exhaustion wrapped in energy, of knowing full well this is going to ruin your night, and doing it anyway. You set your cup down beside your boot and stare up at the stars beginning to flicker in the darkening sky. Out here, there's nothing but wind and horses, and men too. Tired to dream. But at least you got coffee, and that's enough for now. There's a strange quiet now, the kind that settles over the prairie when the fire is burned low. The cattle are still, and even the wind seems to be catching its breath. But beneath that calm surface, you're buzzing. Because Cookie's final batch wasn't just strong, it was practically weaponized. And as you sit by the glowing coals, cup resting upside down in the dust, your insides are conducting a full-blown symphony. Violins of anxiety, drums of indigestion, and a high-pitched whistle from what you assume used to be your spleen. And you're not alone. The other cowboys are wide-eyed in the firelight, blinking slowly, limbs twitching like they've been wired to the wrong end of a telegraph line. Nobody talks. Nobody moves much. They're all just processing. You shift in your seat and feel it. A sharp pang, low and angry. You clutch your stomach gently, like it's a sleeping animal that might bite. That last cup, it did something. You know the truth before you even stand up. It's time. Cowboy coffee, as sacred and necessary as it may be, does not leave quietly. It demands an exit, and it doesn't send a polite notice first. You rise slowly, knees stiff, joints cracking, and glance out toward the darkness beyond the camp, the latrine area, or more accurately, that patch of sagebrush way over yonder. No walls, no privacy, just you, a shovel, and the cold night air. Because out here, there's no indoor plumbing, no outhouse, no toilet paper, just rough leaves, an old rag, or whatever's within arm's reach that doesn't bite back. And cowboy coffee? Well, it accelerates that whole situation. It's not just the caffeine, although that certainly speeds things along. It's the acidity, the sheer bitterness, the combination of half-cooked beans and river water sludge, all of it working together to ensure that when nature calls, she does it at full volume and without delay. You remember a story told around the fire by an old-timer with more wrinkles than teeth about a trail boss who drank so much coffee, on a bet that he had to gallop half a mile from the herd just to avoid causing a stampede. Whether that's true or just cowboy lore, it stuck with you. Historians still argue whether the gastrointestinal trauma caused by daily cowboy coffee was part of why some men rode alone. It's easier to be a legend when no one sees you sprinting. For the bush is at dawn. You make your way into the dark, trying not to trip on rocks or snakes or existential dread. The stars above are so bright you don't need a lantern. Your boots crunch softly, and your body grumbles louder than the cattle ever did. This isn't the part they show in the movies. They show the campfire and the harmonica, the soft whinny of horses, the glow of embers reflecting in steely eyes. They don't show the midnight dash to the latrine zone, cup in one hand, regret in the other. And yet, this is the most human part of cowboy life. The reminder that for all the grit and stoicism, you're still a body one very much at the mercy of what you put into it. And tonight, that includes at least 6 cups of what could legally be classified as corrosive fluid. You find a decent patch of earth, do what needs doing, and take a moment to breathe. The air is crisp. The sky above looks like it's been painted with pinholes of light. Somewhere off in the distance, a coyote calls low and long. You laugh softly, bitterly. Not at the coyote, not even at yourself, just at the absurdity of it all. Riding all day, roasting in the sun, chasing cattle across plains, and ending your night crouched behind a bush, swearing vengeance on a beverage. You shuffle back toward camp, lighter in body, but heavier in thought. Because here's the thing, no one tells you. Coffee on the trail isn't just about caffeine. It's about rhythm, ritual, sanity. You need it. Even if it betrays you. Even if it sends you running into the night with clenched teeth and a prayer for mercy. You reach your bedroll, which smells like wool and dust and something vaguely fungal. You lie down, stare at the stars again, and feel your gut gurgle once more. You sigh, and somewhere across the fire, you hear another man rustling to his feet, muttering something foul under his breath as he hurries off into the dark. You smile. Welcome to the club, friend. The sun has long dipped behind the edge of the world, and the sky above is streaked with deep indigo, tinged orange only at the very horizon. By now, your limbs are trembling. Every step you take feels like dragging iron chains behind your feet. You find yourself blinking harder, not from sleep, but from a strange dizziness. The kind of dizziness that clings to you after hours of sweating under a sun that gave no mercy, training your body to submit to the rhythm of pain. A dizziness not entirely from exhaustion, but maybe from something else. You try to focus on the firelight. A few other men are already curled into their scratchy wool blankets, boots still on, faces hidden beneath arms or hats or rags. Someone nearby lets out a soft groan and turns over, muttering in their sleep. You settle near the fire's fading heart, where only small flames lick the blackened logs, casting low flickers across the heap of mugs, ladles, and unwashed tin plates. Your own stomach is churning now, not from hunger, but from whatever was in that coffee. Cookie's brew had tasted like despair and chalk. You had gulped it earlier like it might save you. Now, hours later, you're unsure whether it saved or cursed you. You reach slowly for your cup again, almost unconsciously, and then freeze. Your hand trembles slightly. Was that a flicker of a mouse in the dark, or a trick of your tired vision? Your cup is empty, but still warm. The scent of charred grounds clings to the rim. You remember someone saying, maybe half in jest, that if you drink too much of Cookie's coffee, you'll start to hear your horse talk back. You laugh softly to yourself, and then you pause, because in that moment, just on the edge of the dark, where the fire's light fades into shadow, your horse is there, standing very still, watching you. Its ears twitch once. You meet its eyes. Then, slowly, it bows its head, as if nodding. And did it just say something? No, of course not. You're just tired. So tired your thoughts no longer know how to separate dreams from the real world. You stand, then immediately wobble. Your knees have decided they no longer support you. You crouch instead. It's safer. The ground feels safer around the fire. Someone chuckles, a dry, strange chuckle. One of the other trainees, maybe. Or was it Cookie? Or someone long gone? You glance around and realize the world is melting at the edges. The fire no longer crackles. It dances and hums, a music you've never heard before. Shapes stretch behind. The flames, ghosts of the arena, ghosts of future battles, of sand and sweat and blood. You hear voices speaking Latin, not loud, just under the surface. The kind of language that rides on smoke and memory. You swear one of them says your name. This is the moment, the very moment when fatigue begins to trick the mind. The coffee kept you awake, but the cost is lucidity. Time becomes syrupy. Seconds stretch like melted wax. You sit again, but you can't remember why. You touch your face. Your own skin feels unfamiliar, like the flesh belongs to someone else. Then, someone places a mug in your hand. You hadn't noticed anyone approach. Cookie? A shadow? You look down. It's warm, black, Bitter, another round. And because you no longer trust what's dream and what's firelight, you drink. The mug tastes like ash and iron, like earth. You grimace and it burns. But there's something else too. You feel alert. No, not. Alert, awakened. The edge of the world starts to sharpen again. The fire snaps. A moth dances through the smoke. You blink. And blink again. But in the back of your mind, the voices are still murmuring, and your horse is still watching you. The night stretches long, and still you haven't found true rest. Your body aches, but sleep will not claim you. You lie curled near the fire's last coals, your wool blanket twisted around your legs like vines. Others sleep deeply now, their breathing shallow but steady. Yet you are caught between worlds, awake but not fully present, exhausted but unable to slip into dreams. The stars above are brilliant and cold. Their light is distant and uncaring, like the gaze of a Roman crowd waiting for spectacle. You find yourself staring up at them now, hands folded across your chest like you're waiting for a burial rite. And then it starts again, that gentle creeping sensation along the inside of your skull. The echo of the voices. Not loud. Just enough to make you sit up. One whisper says, "Rise." You look around. Everyone is asleep. Even Cookie, who is usually the last to turn in, has slumped over beside his kettle, still holding the ladle in one limp hand. You shake your head, trying to chase away the creeping hallucination. Maybe the coffee had gone too long on the coals. Maybe the eggshells he tossed in had been rancid. You vaguely remember someone saying that scorched grounds could twist your stomach inside out and make you see angels. But these are not angels. These are shadows. A flicker of movement at the edge of camp catches your eye. You rub them hard. Was that someone walking? Or just a gust of wind shaking the canvas draped over the wagon? You're not sure anymore. Your hands are trembling. Your lips are dry, and your heart beats too fast for someone lying still. You try to stand. The earth tilts. You try again slowly. This time you stay upright. You glance at the fire, still smoldering. You crouch beside it and stir the ashes with a stick. A few sparks leap upward. Warmth returns to your fingers. You sip from the last of your mug and wish you hadn't. It's bitter, cold, metallic. You think of the countless mugs before it, the endless days of training, the cuts that never properly heal, the bruises, the shouting, the blood, the sand. You shake your head again, this time more forcefully. You need to ground yourself. So you begin to count. 1, 2, 3. You reach 15 before forgetting where you started. The voices return, this time fainter like echoes across water. You decide to walk a short distance, just to clear your head. The stars guide your steps as you make your way beyond the outer edge of the firelight. The grass crunches softly beneath your worn boots. The shadows of grazing cattle loom like ghosts. Somewhere a horse shifts and exhales. You breathe deep. The air is sharp, cold. Real. It's working. You crouch and touch the earth. Solid, cool. Your heartbeat slows. Then, just as you begin to feel normal again, you hear someone say, "You'll fight tomorrow." The words are unmistakable, clear, direct, not a murmur, a sentence. You spin around nobody there. You walk back faster than you intended. You nearly trip over a bedroll. Someone groans in their sleep. You drop to your knees beside your own blanket and clutch the mug like a talisman. You know you're not right. You know something in your mind is fraying at the edges, and yet you feel strangely alive. There's a clarity in this sleepless state, a readiness, a hunger, as if your body has finally accepted that rest isn't coming and has prepared instead. To survive on adrenaline and boiled grounds, you sit, you wait, and you wonder, was that voice from a dream or a warning? Dawn arrives quietly. You don't see the sun rise, but you sense it light creeping in beneath your eyelids, the cold air lifting ever so slightly. The fire is ash now, the coals buried and spent. Around you, the others begin to stir slowly, stiffly. No one speaks yet. You hear grunts, rustling blankets, someone coughing. The kind of morning where everyone is still caught halfway between dream and duty. You try to stand, and your knees betray you. They tremble like they did after your first proper spar. You grab the rim of the coffee pot for balance and nearly tip it. It's empty now, burned dry, its black crust clinging to the bottom like a forgotten offering. Cookie is up. He mutters to himself, already building a new fire. He tosses splinters of kindling into the ring of stones like he's feeding a beast he's grown tired of tending. You watch as he moves stiffly, limping a little. Everyone's got some limp now. One of the younger boys approaches, holding a cracked bucket. He squints at the horizon. Water? Cookie grunts. You know that means yes. The boy shuffles off past the edge of camp toward the murky creek you saw yesterday. No one volunteers to go with him. You stretch. Slowly. Everything hurts. But it's a distant hurt, now familiar. More memory than pain. You hear someone laugh, a dry, raspy sound. It's the tall one, Julius, you think he's holding up his mug and shaking it. Still cursed, he says. Tastes like boiled socks. Someone else chuckles. Another coughs. Then someone farts loudly and unapologetically. That gets a real laugh. You find your voice. At least it's hot. Cookie snorts. Not yet, it ain't. He gestures to the empty kettle dot, and like that, the ritual begins again. The new fire flares, thin and smoky. Cookie drops the kettle onto the iron trivet and starts adding pinches of grounds from a rag-wrapped bundle. The smell of raw coffee hits you, earthy, sharp, oily. One of the boys pulls out a pouch of crushed eggshells and tosses in a handful without being told. He's learning. You sit cross-legged on the ground and rub the heels of your hands into your eyes. Your breath steams in the morning air. You can see everyone around you, now grizzled faces, sunburnt necks, cracked hands. One man trims the end of a stick with a dull knife. Another picks at his teeth with a twig. And you think this is it. This is the rhythm. Hurt. Wake. Boil. Sip. Bleed. Sleep. Repeat. The quiet before the drills is almost sacred. You all know what's coming, but you don't talk about it. The exercises, the shouting, the blisters reopening. The shouting, always the shouting, but for now, there's only the crackle of firewood and the scrape of metal cups. Someone passes you a tin mug. You nod. The coffee isn't ready, but just holding the cup makes things feel predictable. You notice something. Your hands are steady again. That thought stays with you longer than it should. The boy returns with the bucket, sloshing muddy water over the rim. Cookie nods approvingly and pours it straight in, not even bothering to strain it. The kettle hisses. A few flakes of charred shell float to the surface. You stare at them, fascinated. Around you, the others settle in for the wait. Some sit, others stretch. One man walks off to relieve himself, scratching his beard with both hands. And, just like that, the morning becomes its own form of meditation. You don't know how long this will go on. Maybe weeks, maybe years. But this moment, this dusty, bitter, quiet stretch of time, you'll remember. Not because it was good, but because it was bearable. And in a place like this, bearable is sacred. Eventually, the sun climbs high enough to make you squint. The morning has fully arrived. The kettle simmers now, spitting occasional flecks of mud and ground. Cookie leans back and scratches his ribs through his robe. You all take turns watching. The pot, as if it might choose to boil faster under your collective gaze. You sip when it's ready. No one waits for a formal announcement. The brew is bitter burnt and silty, but no one complains. It's warmth. It's something. You cup your hands around the tin and let the heat soak into your fingers, then down into your chest. The quiet. A round camp thins. A voice calls from the far end. A sharp bark, not angry, just efficient. Time to move. You groan. They all groan. A collective ripple of reluctant motion. You pour the last of your coffee into your mouth and wipe your lips on your sleeve. Time to rise, time to go, time to endure. You fetch your gear shield, belt, helmet. You know exactly where each bruise from yesterday will be struck again today. You know exactly how your feet will blister. Your stomach is still sour. Your legs are tight, but you move. You fall into formation with the others. Everyone carries something broken beneath the skin. You can see it in their stares, flat, unreadable, half-dreaming. They don't speak much anymore, only when needed. The drill. Yard awaits. And beyond that, the sand of the real arena. You've never been in a true match. Only mock ones. But those were violent enough to convince you that mock meant very little here. Once during drills you saw someone fall hard and not rise. They didn't speak of him again. You start the day with laps, endless laps, dust rising behind your heels, sweat collecting before you've even been struck. Then the formations, marching, pivots, blocks, overhead guards, shield lifts, thrusts. The rhythm is brutal, predictable, but punishing. The voice shouts corrections. Your back bends. Your arms strain. You slip in someone's spilled bile and catch yourself just before falling. It continues. Hour after hour. Day after day. There is no horizon here. Only the next bruise. The next howl. The next pot of bitter coffee over a spit-black fire. And yet, you begin to notice a change. Somewhere deep in the repetition, your body learns. You block without thinking. Your grip does not falter. You wake just before the shouting starts. Your pain is not gone, but it is yours now known, catalogued, endured. One afternoon, as the light fades and you collapse into camp again, you realize something. You made it through another day. Just one, but you made it. You sip that night's brew with reverence. It tastes exactly as terrible as it always does, but somehow it comforts you. In the flicker of firelight, you think about how long ago your old life feels. You imagine the people you left behind, the food, the softness of a bed. Then Cookie curses as the pot tips and hisses into the fire. Everyone laughs. Even you, Dot, in this place where your life could end in sand and shouting. That small laugh feels like rebellion. Dot, tomorrow will come with more bruises, more shouting, more drills. But for now, you have this moment, this strange, aching brotherhood, this bitter cup in your cracked hands. You sit back, watch the stars blink awake, and know this. You were not made for this life, but you survived it today, Dot, and that is something.